uvetzeincha hazochar, amongst the cattle and sheep which are male, tagdish you shall sanctify, la Hashem Elokecha, to Hashem your God, speaking of the gift of the firstborn animal which the Israelite farmer gives to the Kohen. Lo savod b'bchor sherecha, you may not do work with your firstborn ox. V'lo soges b'cher tzeinecha, nor may you shear your firstborn sheep. Rashi, kol hapcher tagdish, every firstborn you shall sanctify. In another place it says in Leviticus 27, Ach b'cher asher yivukar al Hashem, le yakdish ish esei. The firstborn, which is firstborn to Hashem, no man shall sanctify it, which is a contradiction. Do we sanctify the firstborn or do we not? Haketzad, how do we reconcile this contradiction? The answer is, Eina magdishe lekorban achar. One may not use a firstborn and sanctify that firstborn for the fulfillment of a pledge of something else. He says, hey, I'm giving the firstborn away anyway, so let me get the double benefit. The firstborn is already given to God, by God. The kan limit mitzvah lemer, and here we talk about the gift of the firstborn. We learn that it's a mitzvah to say verbally, Harei ata kodesh lebcheira, you, Mr. Firstborn, are sanctified as a firstborn. Davar achar, another meaning in the expression of tagdish, ef shalemer tagdish. At first glance, one might say that we cannot say tagdish, yagdish, because it says you shall not sanctify. Ef shalemer yagdish, we can't say you shall not sanctify. Shadik kvanemer tagdish, because it already says you should sanctify. Haketzad, magdish ato hegdish ilui, v'nesim lehegdish kifitevis hanoah shabei. One can sanctify it by adding an additional value and giving that value to the temple, to the Beis Hamikdash, according to the benefit of the enjoyment. Meaning that somebody can say, for example, if he has a friend, and his friend has a daughter who has a son who's a Kohen. So he says to his friend, how much will you give me if I give my firstborn to your grandson, the Kohen? Because I can give my firstborn to any Kohen. That amount, let's say it's $5 or $10, that amount is the amount of the pledge which is associated with the firstborn, which he says, I will now give this additional pledge to Hashem. As expressed and as explained in the Talmud tractate Aruchim. One may not work with the firstborn ox, and one may not shear the firstborn sheep. Can one work with the sheep and shear the ox? Of course not. The opposite is also forbidden. Elo shediber hakosuv behova. As always, the verse talks about the usual. It is usual to work with an ox and shear the sheep. What should happen with this firstborn ox or sheep? The Kohen offers it as a sacrifice. Lifnei Hashem Elokecha, before Hashem your God, teichlenu, you shall eat it. Shona b'shona, year by year. It has to be fiscal, as Rashi explains. Ba'mokem asher yivchar Hashem, it has to be in the place which God will choose, which is Jerusalem. Ata uveisecha, you and your household. Rashi, Lifnei Hashem Elokecha teichlenu, la kohen hu omer. Verse 20 is addressed to the Kohen. We already find that the firstborn animal is one of the gifts, one of the 24 gifts of the Kohen. Echotam, whether it's a perfect, unblemished animal, which becomes a sacrifice, v'echad balmum, or it's a blemished animal, which becomes the personal property of the Kohen. Shenemeruf sodom yilach, that flesh shall belong to you, says the Torah to the Kohen. Shana b'shana, mikan she'in mashin eisa yeser al shnasei. From here we learn that one should try not to hold this firstborn more than 1 year, that it should be given away before its first birthday. Yochel yehi pasul misha'obra shnasei. I would think that it becomes unfit and unkosher to give this firstborn to the Kohen once the first birthday of the animal passed. Kvar hukash lemaiser, it was already compared to the second tithe, which we learned earlier in this portion. Shenemar, as it says, V'achalta lefnei Hashem elokecha ma'aseh degoncha tireishcha v'yitzarecha v'cheres bekorcha b'tzeinecha. So in this verse, he compares the firstborn animal to the second tithe, ma ma'aser she'ein nifsal mishana l'chavet, just as we learned with regard to the second tithe, that if somebody didn't give it in that year, he can give it next year or even the year after. The third year is the cutoff, which means that although it's a mitzvah to travel to Jerusalem every year and discharge one's obligations with Meiser Sheni. If I said first tithe, I meant second tithe. So also the first, but if somebody didn't, he can do it the second year or the third year up to Pesach. So also the firstborn, Ein Nifsal, does not become unfit if the first birthday of the animal passes. But it's a better thing if he does it within the first year. Shana b'shana, what is the lesson from this expression? Year to year. If he slaughtered it the last day of its year, one eats it today, and 1 day into the new year. Limed, this is the biblical source which teaches us, that this is eaten, for 2 days and 1 night. What happens if there's a blemish in the firstborn? 21. If there is a blemish, it's lame or blind or any serious blemish, then of course it cannot be offered as a sacrifice to God your God. Rashi, mum is a general statement, klal. Pisei chayiver is an example of that general statement. Prat, that's a specification. Kil mumra is again a general statement. Chazar v'cholal, he again generalizes. This is what we call klal, or prat, or klal, a general statement, an example of that general statement. Closing with another general statement. So we say that iatodon elokein haprat, that anything in the general statement has to match the characteristics of the example given. Mahaprat, just as the example here, lame or blind. Mum hagoli, it's a revealed blemish, and it doesn't heal. Afkol, so also any other kind of blemish, which would allow this firstborn animal not to be offered as a sacrifice, but to become the personal property of the Kohen. Mum shebegoli has to be a revealed blemish, a visible blemish, and a blemish which does not heal. Verse 22, Bisharecha teichleno. In that case, the blemished firstborn may be eaten in your gates, hatome v'hator yachta, whether one is pure, whether one is in a state of defilement or purity, katzvi v'chayo, like one would eat a deer, which can never be brought as a sacrifice, so there's no ritual purity required for a deer. Here there would be no ritual purity required for this blemished firstborn. However, one might think that because it's blemished and cannot be offered as a sacrifice, perhaps the other limitations of law do not apply as well. Perhaps you can eat the blood of this animal? Absolutely not. A Jew may never eat the blood of an animal. The blood must be poured to the ground like water and not eaten whatsoever. Rashi 23, you shouldn't say, Hail v'kula heter, being that everything is permitted, haba meklal isirhu, and it comes from the category of forbidden, sharei kodesh, because this animal was once holy, v'nishchat bachutz, now it was slaughtered outside of the holy temple. B'lei pidyon, there was no redemption. Why? Because it was blemished, v'nechal, and it can be eaten. Yochal, I would think, yehi af hadam muter, because of that, perhaps we'll go all the way and say the blood is also permissible. Talmud leim berakas domei leiseichel, only its blood you shall not eat. The animal has to be treated like a regular mundane animal, maintaining all the laws of the consumption of a kosher animal. Chapter 16, verse 1. One of the reasons that this portion is read towards the end of every major festival is because it talks about every major festival, beginning with the first, which is Pesach. Shomer, guard, es Chodesh HaAviv, the month of spring. Yasisa, you shall make Pesach, Passover, L'Hashem Elokecha, to God your God. Ki, because b'Chodesh HaAviv, in the season of spring, in the month of spring, Hotziach Hashem Elokecha, God your God brought you forth, Mitzrayim, from Egypt, Loilo, at night. Rashi, Shomer es Chodesh HaAviv, Mikedem Bei, even before spring gets there, Shomer, or Shmeir, guard it, Sheheiroi LaAviv. Make sure that it is fit for spring. Lahakriv Beyas Minchas HaOmer, where it's the appropriate season to bring the offering of the barley offering of the Omer. V'im Lavan, if not, Aberes Hashona, proclaim it a leap year. And this is talked about, discussed in great detail in the tractate Sanhedrin, how the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, would sit and debate every year, months and months before, usually before Rosh Hashanah, whether the following year should be proclaimed a leap year, because what will happen 6 months later when Pesach comes? Will Pesach be in the right season? There are other conditions which influence the declaration by the courts as to whether this should be a leap year or not. But one thing is clear. The courts are commanded to guarantee that Pesach always fall in the month of spring. When it doesn't, a leap year must be proclaimed. There's another commandment, and that is that Sukkot has to fall in the season of autumn or fall, and we'll talk about that at a different time. Mimitzrayim Laila, you came forth from Egypt at night. This seems perplexing. V'alei bayom yotzu, didn't the children of Israel emerge from Egypt during the day, at noon? Shenamar mimochras haPesach yotzu b'nei Yisrael, the day after the Paschal offering, the children of Israel left. Alafisha balayla nosalem paradishus lotzes, because already at midnight, when the plague of the firstborn came about, Pharaoh came running after Moshe and Aaron and said, go. And they said, we're not going to leave like thieves in the night. We're going to wait until broad daylight. Shenamar vayikra l'Moshe la'Aaron layla. Therefore, already at night, they had the full permission to leave. When this season comes, verse 2, B'sabachta, you shall offer Pesach, a Paschal offering, L'Hashem Elokecha, to God your God. This Paschal offering is made up of tzayin, either sheep or bakar, and cattle, b'mokem asher yibchar Hashem. And the place which God will choose, cattle, Rashi says, is goats, either sheep or goats, l'shaken shmei shom, in the place that God will choose to cause his name to dwell there. Rashi, v'zabachta Pesach L'Hashem Elokecha tzayin, shenema min hakvosim u'mino izim tikochu. Sheep or goats is for the Paschal sacrifice. So what's uvokar, what's the cattle? The Paschal sacrifice, Rashi explains, is not what is not brought from cattle. So what is the cattle here? Tizbach lachagiga. That's another offering which is associated with the Paschal sacrifice. For example, at the Pesach Seder today, one of the items on the Seder plate is the egg. What is the purpose of putting the egg on the Seder plate? It is reminiscent of the festive offering called Chagiga, which came from cattle. Shimnimu al Pesach, because if people signed up for the particular Paschal offering, Chabura, group by group, Maviyanim Chagiga, they always brought a Paschal festive offering, Kadeshi Nechal Aseva, which was eaten first, in order that the Paschal sacrifice be eaten in a state of satiation, on a full stomach. Our sages also deduced many other important teachings from this verse. Lo sochal alav chometz, you shall not eat chometz while this is happening. Shivas yomim, for 7 days, tochal olav, you must eat with it. Matzos, matzah, lechem, only the bread of affliction. Ki, reminding you that b'chipozon, in haste, yotzosa, you came forth. Me'eretz Mitzrayim, from the land of Egypt, Laman Tizkar, in order that you will remember Es Yom Tzeischa Me'eretz Mitzrayim, the day upon which you emerged from the land of Egypt, Kol Yemei Chayecha, all the days of your life. This is one of the 6 remembrances. We must verbally mention the Exodus from Egypt every day. Rashi 3, Lechem, only Lechem Shamaskir Sa'ini, bread that recalls the affliction. shenesanu b'Mitzrayim, which they suffered in Egypt, ki b'chiposin yotzoso, v'lehispik botzek lahachmis, and the dough did not have a chance to rise. And this yilachah shall be to you l'zikaron, as a memorial. V'chiposin le'shalcha, you didn't rush. Elashal Mitzrayim, the Egyptians rushed you. Shekenu emer v'techzak Mitzrayim ala'am, the Egyptians were urgent upon the people. Laman tisker, in order that you will remember al yidei achilas hapesach v'hamatzah, through the consumption of the Paschal sacrifice, through the consumption of matzah, es yom tzeischa, the day which you came forth. 4, v'lo yoro lechaser b'chol gvulcha shivas yomim, no leaven shall be seen within your borders all 7 days. V'lo yolin min haboser asher tizbach ba'orev. Furthermore, there shall not sleep over the night, not remain overnight from the flesh, which you will sacrifice in the evening, by Yom Rishon, on the first day, la'beiker, until morning. What does this refer to, Rashi? V'layolin min haboser asher tizbach ba'orev b'yom rishon la'beiker, azhora, this is an admonition, l'meisir, to one who leaves over b'pesach deiros, of the Paschal sacrifice in future generations. L'fisha le'nemar el b'pesach Mitzrayim, because this mitzvah was only specifically stated heretofore with the Paschal sacrifice of Egypt. Here he tells us that this is true for all future Paschal sacrifices. Yom Rishon HaMarkan, what is the first day he refers to here? Hu Yudalad b'Nisan. It's actually what we call Erev Pesach, the 14th of Nisan. Kemodat Eimer, as you say, Ach b'Yom Rishon tashbisu se'er mibatechem, as the verse says, only on the first day you shall remove all leavening from your houses. We know that that first day is Erev Pesach. That's why Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach, we already stopped eating chametz. Being that the verse stopped speaking of the laws of the Paschal sacrifice and began already speaking of the laws of the 7 days of Pesach, like these verses, so you have to specify now what sacrifice it is speaking of. If he just wrote that, I would say perhaps it refers to the peace offerings which are brought by those who come to Jerusalem all 7 days. Perhaps none of them may have any meat left over until morning. And perhaps they can only be eaten on the day that they're offered and that night. That's why it says in the evening, on the first day, Erev Pesach, speaking of the Paschal sacrifice. Another meaning, the Torah speaks of the festive offering mentioned above, and it teaches us that this festive offering is eaten for 2 days. So then, this Rishon would be the 15th day of Nisan. The simple meaning is that he's speaking about the festive offering, which you will offer the evening before. Should not carry over the night of the 15th going to the 16th. But it may be eaten on the 14th and the 15th, as is the law by festive offerings. Shnei yomim v'layla echad. V'kach ishnuya b'meseches psachim. Verse 6, verse 5, Leisuchal lizbeach hasaposach biachad shorecha asher Hashem elokecha neisin lach. You may not sacrifice the Paschal sacrifice in any of the cities that God your God will be giving you. Ki im el hamokim, merely only in the place asher yivchar Hashem elokecha l'shaken shmei, where God, your God, will choose to cause his name to dwell, which is Jerusalem. Sham, there tizbach, you shall sacrifice and offer as ha-pesach, the Paschal offering, bo'erev in the evening, kibei hashemesh, as the sun is going down, meyed in the season, tzeischa mitzrayim, as you came forth from Egypt, which is the day before Pesach, in the afternoon. Bo'erev kibei hashemesh, the 14th day of Nisan, you have 3 different times here. Bo'erev, evening, from noon and on, from the 6th hour and on, you can offer it. When the sun sets, you can eat it. But at the time that you left Atasefeu, you burn it. It becomes left over and it has to be burned. 7, ubishalto, and you shall roast it, uvachalto, and eat it, bamokim, in the place, which God your God will choose, ufanisa babaker, and then in the morning you turn, you can go home. 7 ubishalto, this is roasting by fire, shapo kore bishul, which is also called bishul, which usually means cooking. Here it means roasting. Ufanisa babaker, the bakar shosheni, the morning of the second day. Melamed, this teaches us that the Jew was required, that the Jew had to sleep in Jerusalem the night of the 15th, going to the 16th. 8, Sheshes Yomim Teichal Matzahs, for 6 days you shall eat matzahs. And on the 7th day, Atzeres is a day of tarrying, restraining, LaHashem Elokecha, to Hashem your God, Leisasem Elocha. You shall not engage in any labor. So here we learn about Shvi, Shal Pesach, the 7th day of Pesach, also a major festival. In the diaspora, of course, the first 2 days are major, and the last 2 days are major. Sheshes Yom Teichal Matzahs. 6 days you shall eat matzahs. A seemingly strange verse. Of Makam Achar Oeim, in another place it says Shivas Yomim, for 7 days you shall eat matzahs. Is it 6 or is it 7? Shiva min hayoshen v'shisha min hachodesh. One reconciliation is that you eat matzah in total of 7 days. But the first day, it could still be from the old crop, and the next 6 days, it could be from the new crop because you brought the omer. Davarachar, another meaning, Limidus teaches us alachilas matzah bashvi sheina chayva, that eating matzah on the 7th day is not an obligation. You're not allowed to eat chametz, but you don't have to eat matzah. From here we learn l'sheishas hayomim that all the other 6 days is also not obligatory to eat matzahs. Shaharei shvi bechlal hoya, because this is following the rule of something that was in the generalization and came forth, teaches us a lesson for the entire generalization. So the 7th day, Bechlal Hoya, was in the generalization. And then it departed by the verse saying 6 days you shall eat matzah. Lalama, to teach us that the eating of matzah on the 7th day is optional. Following the rule, it doesn't teach merely for itself. It teaches the teaching applies to the entire general rule. Just as the 7th day is optional, you want to eat matzah, eat it. You don't want to eat it, don't eat it. Kulam reshus, all 7 days are optional. Chutz, the exception would be Milayla Harishan, the first night of Pesach, or in the diaspora, the first 2 nights of Pesach. Sha'akosef k'voy chayva, where the Torah establishes that as an obligation you must eat matzah the Seder nights. Shanema bo erev, in the evening, teichlu matzahs, you shall eat matzahs. The rest of Pesach, you want to eat matzah, eat it. You don't want to eat it, don't eat it, as long as you don't eat chametz. Atzeres, technically, because we have to say hamotzi on Shabbos and Yom Tov and celebrate the festival with lechem mishnah, we can't eat chametz, so we have to eat matzah. But it's not that you have to consume matzah, it's that you have to consume a whole bread, which in this case would be matzah. Or it doesn't mean you have to consume the whole bread, which means you have to say the blessing on a complete bread, which in this case would be matzah, so you have to eat matzah. Hold yourself back from any labor. A gathering of eating and drinking. As it says, let us detain you. So that's the festival of Pesach. Segueing right into the next festival, Shavuos, Shiva Shavuos Tisperloch. You shall count 7 weeks. From the time the sickle is first put to the standing grain, you begin to count Shiva Shavuos, 7 weeks. What sickle and what grain? 9. When from the time the omer is cut, which is the beginning of the harvest season. And then you shall make Chag Shavuos, the festival of weeks, LaHashem Elokecha, to Hashem your God. Misas, following the measure, Nidvas Yodcha, of the free will offering of your hand, Asher Titin, that which you will want to give, which means that according to what one can afford, one brings sacrifices to Jerusalem when one comes to Jerusalem. On Shavuos, on every festival, Kasher Yivarechecha, Hashem Elokecha, as God, your God will bless you. Misas nidvas yotcha, de nidvas yotcha, according to what is sufficient for your hand. Hakol bracha. How many sacrifices does one have to bring to Jerusalem? The answer is, how much blessing did one experience? Have shalmei simcha, by bringing peace offerings of joy. Bekadosh kruyim lechol, invite many guests to eat if you had a bountiful season. 11, v'samachta, and you shall rejoice lifnei Hashem Elokecha, before Hashem your God. Ata, you, uvincha, and your son, ubitecha, and your daughter, v'abdecha, and your male servant, v'amasecha, and your female servant, v'halevi, and the Levi, asher b'sharecha, which is in your gate. So here he goes on to enumerate v'hager, the stranger, v'ayosem, and the orphan, v'almona, and the widow, asher b'kirbecha, which is amongst you, v'amokim, in the place, asher yibchar Hashem Elokecha, which God, your God, shall choose, l'shakin shmei sham, to cause his name to dwell there. Rashi points out a very central teaching, v'halevi, v'hager, v'ayosem, v'almona, arba shali. If you, the Jew, take care of my 4 favorite entities, that is the Levite, representing the infrastructure of Judaism, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow, I will take care of your 4, your son, your daughter, your male servant, and your female servant, which, as stated earlier this week, in our contemporary society is your family. Your son and daughter is your family, and your stocks and bonds, your real estate, your investments. Now let's look into Rashi 11. Arba shali, 4 of mine, keneged arba shalcha, corresponding to 4 of yours. You take care of my 4, I'll take care of your 4. Bincha v'techa v'abdecha v'amasecha. Imata misameach shali, you make my 4 happy. Ani misameach shalcha, I will make a shalach, your 4 happy. Verse 12 is acharta, you shall remember ki eved yisa b'mitzrayim, that you were a slave in Egypt, b'shamarta, and you will observe yosisa and do es achukim o'ela, these statutes. 12 is acharta ki eved yisa amanas came p'disicha, with this in mind I redeemed you. Shetishmer, you should observe etas, and you should do hachukim o'ela, these statutes. Now we segue into the next and last festival, Chag HaSukkos, the festival of Sukkos, Tasa l'cha, you shall make for you. How long does the festival last? Shivas Yomim, 7 days. Biospacha, when you have the ingathering, migoncha, of your threshing floors, umiyikvecha, on your wine presses, Rashi, biospacha, bisman ha'osef, the season and time of ingathering, shatamachnes labayas, when you bring into the house, peres hakayetz, the summer fruits. Davaracha ba'ospacha, migoncha, umiyikvecha, limit shemesakchin es ha'sukkah b'pseos geirim v'yekiv. This teaches us that you cover the sukkah with that which is left over from the threshing floor and the wine press. The ceiling, the roof of the sukkah, has to be vegetation that grows. 14, v'samachta, and you shall rejoice b'chagecha, in your festival. Ata, you, uvincha v'techa, your son and your daughter, v'abdecha v'masecha, and your male and female servant. V'alevi v'ager v'yosem v'almona asher b'sharecha, and the Levi, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow in your gates. Again, a repetition of my 4 and your 4. Here we see that the underlying theme of Sukkot is joy. V'samachta b'chagecha, you shall rejoice in your festival. Verse 15, Shivas Yomim, for 7 days, Tocha, you shall celebrate. Hashem Elokecha, to God your God, Ba'mokim, in the place Hashem, which God your God shall choose, Ki yivarechecha, as God will bless you, Hashem Elokecha b'chel tvoscha, with all of your produce, v'chel ma'aseh yadecha, and in all the work of your hands. V'yisa ach sameach, you shall be very happy. There's a mitzvah for a Jew to rejoice in his bounty. V'yisa ach sameach lepipshuta ein ze loshen tzivoy el loshen haftacha. In the simple sense, this is not even a commandment, it's a promise. To include the evening of the last day of the festival for joy, that throughout Sukkot we should be joyous. Therefore, the festival of Sukkot, its very underlying theme is joy, especially when we bring in the other component, which is the 7, the expression of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the water pouring, and the celebration associated with that, the singing and the dancing and the music, as is expressed nowadays as well. 16. Sholesh Pomim Bashana, 3 days a year, Yerah Kol Schurcha, every male shall appear as Pnei Hashem Elokecha before the countenance of Hashem your God, b'mokem asher yivchar, in the place which God shall choose, referring to Jerusalem. B'chag ha'matzos, u'b'chag ha'shavuos, u'b'chag ha'sukkos, in the festival of matzahs, the festival of weeks, and the festival of sukkos. V'lo yero es pnei Hashem reikam, and do not appear before God your God empty-handed. On this verse, on these verses, there's an entire tractate of Talmud called Chagiga, the festive offerings that a person has to bring when he visits Jerusalem 3 times a year. 16, bring offerings of appearance and festive peace offerings. 17, ish kemat nas yodei, how many offerings should a person bring? Every man should give what he can afford, according to the blessing of God your God, asher nasan lach, which he gave you. Rashi 17, ish kemat nas yodei, mish yesh lo echan harbe nechasim merubim, somebody who has many people who will eat and many possessions, yabi eilis merubim, should bring many burnt offerings, or shlomim merubim, and many peace offerings, because the burnt offerings are burnt on the altar, but the peace offerings are used to feed one's guests with. End of portion.